Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
This is Science for Humans with Dr. Jeff Galini.
How do you like that, Dr. Jeff, huh? I mean, literally, we were ready to go on the air. We were 2 minutes out from going on the air, and everything just crashed.
Well, you know what they say, man, on any given day, right?
Yeah, but we bounced back pretty quickly. I learned a lesson. I tried to do a restart. And you can't do a restart on the server. You must shut it completely down and restart it from scratch to get all the drivers to launch. So we learned that lesson today. Thank you very much for that. How are you, Dr. Jeff?
You know, I'm doing great. It was a nice, brisk morning, but doing good. How about you, Carl?
Good. I'm doing really good. I had 2 nights of great sleep in a row. I think I've finally unlocked what has been. First thing I did was I got rid of that darn CPAP machine. That thing was smothering me at night.
Really?
Yeah. It's gone. But I'm going to do a whole show about this because I think I've unlocked some factors that'll help a lot of guys out there get a better night's sleep. When I sleep good, I get into the gym. I'm like King Kong. When I don't sleep good, I get into the gym. I'm like Maid Marian. I just can't get it done.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm the same way, you know, always looking for a better way to get a good night's sleep.
Yeah. Have you been training, Dr. Jeff? Are you back in the gym at all?
I have. You know, I've been doing pretty good. I'll tell you, ever since I went off that gluten, feeling really good.
Isn't that amazing?
You know, I feel like I'm absorbing, my protein's better. I'm actually starting to grow and being able to kick it up a little bit. So feeling good.
I have to imagine that you'll be able to put on muscle very quickly because of the whole, what I like to call the Casey Viator phenomenon, you know, where he lost all the weight and then he put all that weight back on for that ad real quick. I mean, I got to believe that you'll blow up real quick if you just train and eat consistently.
You know, and that's really what's happening. You know, I've been quite busy, so trying to get a little more consistent with my eating, basically increasing my calories, but my body weight is staying the same around 225, but I'm noticing, my body fat is coming down, and my strength is going up. So that's always a good sign.
Yeah, very, very good. And obviously we're going to talk about something today that rolls into this whole discussion about strength, especially, and that is the element calcium, correct?
Correct. You know, we kind of finished our vitamin series, and I thought, you know, now we've got all these wonderful minerals, so what a better one to start with than calcium. Very interesting mineral. You know, I think most people have heard of calcium, but never really probably thought about the fact that it is a metal. You know,
I was shocked. I was shocked when I read that. I was like, what?
Yeah, you don't think about these minerals actually being heavy metals. In its raw form, it's soft and gray. It's alkaline earth metal, and it's the 5th most abundant element by mass in the Earth's crust. It's also the 5th most abundant ion that's dissolved in seawater. So it is quite readily out there. You know, we'll talk a little bit, how do we get that metal, into what we ingest as a supplement later on. But I wanted to kind of touch on, the fact that calcium is also the most abundant mineral in our body. And it's required, for the formulation of our bones, for healthy bodily functions like muscle contractions, blood clotting, strong heart, helps to regulate blood pressure. And I saw a couple studies on, curbing PMS and even maintaining a healthy weight.
So well, let's not forget strength.
Yes.
The thing that a lot of people don't realize is, but part of the reason anabolic steroids make you so strong, part of it is neural, from a neural excitatory effect. But the other part is because of the way it modulates calcium channels in muscle fiber. And the calcium channel is what makes muscle fibers contract.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the firing pin, so to say, for that muscle to contract properly. excuse me, you need calcium. Very, very important.
So, where, I mean, obviously, where do we get our calcium from? Is it just, do you have to supplement with it to get it, or is it something that we get plenty of in food?
It is quite readily available in food sources. Being that it's, it is the fifth most abundant in the soil and in seawater, as we grow things, it comes up into those plants. But dark leafy greens, very, very high in calcium. Any of your low-fat or fat cheeses, milks, yogurts, tofu, all very, very high in calcium. Even some of the milks, are calcium fortified. Cabbage. A lot of people don't eat cabbage anymore. I like cabbage.
I love cabbage.
Bok choy, cabbage, good sources of calcium. And then you get into things like okra, broccoli, green snap peas. And then my two favorite that just keep coming up and up and up. I almost think almonds are like the miracle food.
Yeah, isn't that something?
I mean, they contain calcium also. I mean, so quite abundant. And, 264 milligrams in 100 grams of almonds.
Wow.
Which, I don't know.
Three ounce,
a little bit ounce or something,
Yeah, a little more than 3 ounces, really, is what that is.
And then most fish, high amounts of calcium. So, pretty easy if you eat a well-rounded diet, of good leafy greens, you have dairy, you eat fish and almonds, pretty easy to get that calcium, unless you go out and drink some seawater,
There you go. I was really surprised in preparation for the show. Every morning I generally have 6 eggs and 2 cups of cottage cheese, and I make the eggs like a frittata, and then I fold it over like an omelet, and I put the cottage cheese in the middle. And so I thought, I wonder how much calcium I'm getting from my cottage cheese. And it's only 100 milligrams per half cup, so I'm only getting 400 milligrams of calcium in that breakfast meal in the morning. I thought I was getting a lot more than that.
And so did I. And after getting ready for this show, I discovered, boy, I got to take a little more calcium. Again, we just don't think about these things. As we've been talking about, we're so interested in the next newest item that's going to save the world, and we forget about, how our body works and how important, minerals are to normal functioning. Now, calcium is one that's more talked about, but I think most people believe that calcium is only important for older women. But, that's not true. Everybody needs calcium.
What I'd like to do, I know we kind of did this backwards. I'm sorry, I was a little off my game here with what happened. We talked about food sources of calcium. What I'd like to do is take our break now and come back and talk about some symptoms of deficiency. And then also about supplementation, because there's a lot of misinformation about supplementation. And I think supplementation should be based on your lifestyle to some degree and some other factors. So we'll get into that a little bit later. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, so sit tight. We'll be right back with more Science for Humans. We're talking about calcium. Stay tuned. Do you know how to properly use carbohydrates to ignite your performance in the field and in the gym? You will now, thanks to this free book by EFX Sports. The Carb User's Guide for Maximum Performance reveals why omitting carbohydrates from your diet can totally crush your gains. Ever wonder how many grams you need for your specific sport? Not anymore. We give you the critical number you need to dominate your competition. You'll even discover the super carb that's taking the athletic world by storm. You must try it to believe it. Go to getcarbolyn.com/carb guide today and get your copy absolutely free. Once again, it's GETKARBOLYN.com/CARBGUIDE.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Welcome back to Science for Humans with my co-host, Dr. Jeff Galini. So, Dr. Jeff, are the symptoms of calcium deficiency easily observable?
Some of them are.
Oops, sorry about that. So,
Hey, that was some good tunes there.
Yeah,
some of them are very, and there's quite a long list. Again, the more important a substance is, the more symptoms you are. But, muscle cramps, aches, in the muscle, pain in the muscle spasms. Again, we always associate this with potassium, but it's actually more prominent that you are deficient in calcium. I know that in the past I'd wake up and my muscles were just twitching, and I never knew what that was, but that also is kind of a calcium deficiency.
Wow.
And you were talking about insomnia. Well, calcium. So I am going to start taking me some calcium at night. Tooth decay, weak bones, which are things that I think most people have heard about, reduced bone density. There's quite a few things for children. Calcium is more important. Well, I shouldn't say more important, but very important, for childhood, adolescence. Because even though rickets aren't very broad here, that is one of the causes is a calcium deficiency. Children who have poor growth, delayed puberty in teens, menstrual problems in teens, premenstrual cramps, and the list goes on, increased blood pressure. And then here's some things that I didn't know about, but if you have coarse hair or brittle nails, that's calcium.
Really?
And then easily fatigued, where you just kind of start walking and you just run out of gas. Your muscles, they're just not firing. It's kind of like in your car, your plugs just not being synced up right.
Right.
You just run out of gas. So pretty important stuff, Carl.
And we've done shows about minerals in general, but the irony is that a lot of the symptoms are similar. So, we talk about muscle cramps, right? And you and I are both the same. We always say, oh, that's potassium, eat a banana. But it could be calcium, but it also could be sodium. I don't think anyone will ever forget Paul DeLay being carried off of the Night of Champions stage, I believe in New York, when his diuretic protocol went wrong and he was so depleted in sodium he couldn't move. He became a statue of himself.
Absolutely.
So,
and, calcium is just one of 7 electrolytes. So, any one imbalance is going to cause cramping.
Which really, but I think I think that people just assume they're getting enough calcium, and on top of that, we've had some scaremongering in the past, and this is why I think calcium supplementation, which we'll talk about here in a moment, is very, very specific to your goals, your lifestyle, and so on, because we had a lot of people saying 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day. But for inactive people, that may be too much. And for very active people, that may not be enough. So, where do you stand on the whole supplementation, idea? Obviously there's plenty of food out there with calcium. It's in abundance, but you and I are both looking at our diet and going, wow, I may not be getting enough calcium because I'm a hard training individual.
Well, for kids, I think as, kids and adolescents, their body retains that calcium. So I don't know whether or not, as long as they're drinking milk, they're probably getting enough. But the older we get, our body will actually steal the calcium that's stored in our bones and teeth whenever it needs it. And that's kind of why you get to that brittleness or you have all these osteoporosis and bone issues. But I think, you do need to supplement. Kids need to get about, 1,200 milligrams a day. And most of them, they're usually drinking milk and eating dairy and stuff, probably come pretty close to it. For reproductive years for women, pregnant breastfeeding, I'm looking at about 1,300 milligrams. After that, about 800. When we get into our 50s, we're looking at about 1,500 milligrams a day.
Really?
Yeah. Now, not Dr. Chad Deal, who's the director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Osteoporosis and Metabolic Bone Disease. That's a long name.
Yeah.
He published it, said, our bodies just can't utilize a whole lot of calcium supplementation at one time. So he recommends that you take 2 doses, no more than about 500 to 600 milligrams per dose. If not, you end up just wasting it, excreting it out. So I think that's what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to break my dosages up and take one in the morning, and then I'm going to see taking one at night if it helps improve sleep.
And obviously taking it with a meal, maybe your last meal, I have to imagine that helps absorption. What about the forms of calcium? So there's calcium carbonate, which is the least expensive form, and from what I understand is the least bioavailable as compared to things like calcium citrate and calcium, what's the other one? Citrate and...
There's a lot of forms. You've
got calcium glycinate.
Glycinate, chelate. I think everybody's body is a little bit different. Calcium carbonate is what Tums is made of.
Right.
That carbonate helps to obviously buffer the stomach. But like you said, it's a very low form of calcium. You still get calcium in. Some say calcium citrate, is more readily available, but then I've seen the same on other types of forms. I think you just got to find what works good for you. I'm not sure what form I'm going to use, Carl.
I use calcium. I use calcium calcium citrate.
Do you?
Yeah, and it comes in. It's 1,200 milligrams across 2 capsules, so I can take 1 some days or 2 some days, and just supplement with 6 or 1,200 milligrams, depending on how my diet is that day and how much calcium I'm getting. But I'm starting to think that those of us who train really, really hard, we lift heavy weights, we're doing morning cardio. I mean, I'm up first thing in the morning on the treadmill, I'm doing my cardio. Those of us who train really hard, I have a feeling that we need more calcium because I have a feeling that we're burning it up and we're using it to make our bones stronger, to compensate for the strength in our muscles. We know that the chassis upregulates when the horsepower increases in the body. So as your muscles get bigger, your muscles actually send signals to your bones. You guys need to be stronger to handle the torque. So I think that if you're a hard training athlete, I don't think it's unrealistic with dietary intake and some supplementation to get into the 1,800 milligram a day range.
And I have to agree with you. And what you got to remember is, most people think of the bone as just being some hard thing, but it's actually a living tissue that's constantly fluctuating. You've got new bone being created and destroyed all the time. And like I said, if you don't have enough calcium, it's required for muscle contraction. Your body will steal it from those bones. And again, hard training athletes, you don't want to have weak bones. That's where you're going to run into a lot of your problems, getting your disc out and, you name it.
Yeah. I think, and again, weakness. The one common thing in people who are deficient in calcium is muscle weakness. And that's because every single muscle fiber has what's known as a calcium channel. And that's what fires the muscle. That's what makes that fiber contract. So if you don't have enough calcium in your body and some of your muscle fibers don't have adequate calcium to activate the calcium channel, you may only be working with half of the muscle power that you have available to you.
Yeah, and have you ever gone to the gym? I know I have, and it just feels like the gravity is stronger today. You just have no strength.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. I mean, you might as well go because you really just can't get much done those days,
And don't forget about vitamin D with calcium because it's very, very important that the calcium go where it belongs.
Absolutely.
And vitamin D enhances that anyway. All right, listen, anything else you want to say about calcium?
Just as usual, I'm, as you mentioned, capsules. I really like capsules because, you don't have all those binders and things.
Right.
But remember, you can go buy calcium very cheap at the big wholesale clubs. And the reason why it's cheap is it's cheap stuff. Always go to a reputable health food store, somebody where that researches and has quality brands.
Very good point. Very good point. Dr. Jeff, thanks a lot for struggling through the technical difficulties on today's show with me, okay?
Not a problem, man. We'll talk to you later.
All right, talk to you later. All right.